is dirty. It's greasy. I didn't wash it last night. Coffee or water? Coffee or water? Hello. Sorry if you joined and then I ended it. I forgot to rename it like from last night's live, so it was still like Kingdom of Ash chapters 20 through 23. Okay, so we are reading Aelin's Rescue today, and just to get it through, like just to get through with it, just so that I don't stall any more than I'm already going to be stalling, we're just gonna jump right into it. We'll get started, we'll read it, I'll have a fucking panic attack, and it'll be good. It'll be good. We're probably gonna cry today. I'm prepared for it. Been preparing myself for it all day. And so yeah, we're god damn. Literally feel like I'm gonna throw up. All right, let's get started. Chapter 25. Let's go. Oh god, I'm gonna fucking throw up. Karine had let her rot in the box for a while. It was quieter here. No endless, droning roar of the river. Nothing but that pressure, building and building and building under her skin, in her head. She couldn't outrun it, even in oblivion. But still, the irons dug in, chafing against her skin. Wetness pulled beneath her as time wheeled by, as Maeve undoubtedly brought that collar closer with each hour. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. She drifted down again, into a pocket of the dark, where she told herself that story, the story, over and over. Who she was, what she stood to destroy should she yield to the near airlessness of the box, to the rising strain. It wouldn't matter, though. Once that collar went around her neck, how long would it take until the Valk prince within pried from her everything Maeve wished to know, violated and delved into every inner barrier to mind those vital secrets? Karine would begin again soon. It would be wretched, and then the healers would return with their sweet-smelling smoke, as they had come these months, these years, however long it had been. But she'd seen beyond them, for an instant, had seen canvas fabric draped overhead, rushes covered with woven rugs beneath their sandaled feet, brazier smoldered all around. A tent. She was in a tent. Murmuring sounded outside, not nearby, but oh, she's in a tent. She's in a tent. So that means she's in that fucking camp. Oh my god. Murmuring sounded outside, not nearby, but close enough for her Fae hearing to pick up. People speaking in both her tongue and the old language. Someone muttering about the cramped camp conditions. An army camp, full of Fae. A more secure location, Karine had said. Maeve had wanted her here, to guard her from Morath, until Maeve clamped the cold wordstone collar around her neck. But then oblivion swept in. When she awoke, cleaned and without an ache, she knew Karine was soon to begin. His canvas had been wiped bare, ready for him to paint red. His terrible, grand finale, not to pry information from her, not with Maeve's triumph at hand, but for his own pleasure. Aelin was ready too. They hadn't chained her to an altar this time, but to a metal table, set within the center of the large tent. He'd had them bring the comforts of home, or whatever Karine might consider home. A tall chest of drawers stood by one canvas wall. She doubted it held clothes. Fenris lay beside it, head on his front paws, sleeping. For once, sleeping. Grief laid heavy on him, dulling his coat, dimming his bright eyes. Another table had been placed near the one on which she lay. A cloth covered 3 humped objects. On it, beside the one closet, a patch of black velvet also had been left out. Closest, sorry, not a closet. For the instruments he'd use on her, the way a merchant might display his finest jewels. 2 chairs sat facing each other on the other side of the second table, before the large brazier full to the brim with crackling logs. The smoke curled upward, up. A small hole had been cut into the tent ceiling, and through it, Aelin couldn't fight the trembling in her mouth at the night sky, at the pinpricks of light shining in it. Stars. Just 2, but there were stars overhead. The sky itself. It was not the heaviness of full night, but rather a murky, graying black. Dawn. Fuck. likely an hour or so away, if the stars remained out. Perhaps she would last long enough to see sunlight. Fenris's eyes shot open, and he lifted his head, ears twitching. Aelin took steadying breaths as Corrine shoved through the tent flaps, offering a glimpse of fires and lightning darkness, beyond. Nothing else. "Enjoy your rest?" Aelin said nothing. Corrine ran a hand down the metal table's edge. "I've been debating what to do with you, you know. How to really savor this, make it special for us both before our time is through." Fenris's snarl rumbled through the tent. Corrine just swept the cloth from the smaller table. Low metal dishes on 3 legs, piled with unlit logs. Aelin stiffened as he hauled one over and set it beneath the foot of the metal table. A small brazier, its legs cut short for its bowl to hover barely above the ground. He set the second brazier below the table center, the third at the head. "We've played with your hands before," Corrine said, straightening. Aelin began shaking, began tugging on the chains, anchoring her arms above her head. His smile grew. "Let's see how your entire body reacts to flame without your special little gift. Perhaps you'll burn like the rest of us." Aelin yanked uselessly, her feet sliding against the still cool metal. "Not like this." Corrine reached into his pocket and withdrew some flint. I don't like this. I need him to hurry up. This wasn't just a breaking of her body, but a breaking of her, of the fire she'd come to love, to destroy the part of her that sang. He'd melt her skin and bones until she feared the flame, until she hated it, as she hated those healers who had come again and again to repair her body, to hide what was real from what had been a dream. Fenris's snarl rolled on endless. Sorry, there was a comma there. I'm nervous enough. I'm going too fast. Corrine said mildly, "You can scream all you like, if it pleases you." The table would turn red hot, and the scent of burning flesh would fill her nose, and she wouldn't be able to stop him. She would sob in agony as the burns went so deep, through skin and into bone. The pressure in her body, her head, faded. It became secondary as Corrine fished a rolled pouch from his other pocket. He set it upon the swath of black velvet, and she could make out the indents of the slender tools inside. "For when heating the table grows boring," he said, patting the toolkit. "I want to see how far the burns go inside your skin." Bile shot up her throat as he weighed the flint in his hands and stepped closer. She began fraying then. Who she was and had been melting away as her own body would soon melt when this table heated. The hand she'd been dealt. It was the hand she'd been dealt, and she would endure it, even as a word took form on her mouth. "Please." She tried to swallow it, tried to keep it locked in as Corrine crouched beside the table, flint raised. "You do not yield. You do not yield. You do not yield." "Wait." The word was a rasp. Corrine paused, rose from his crouch. "Wait?" Aelin shook, her breathing ragged. "Wait." Corrine crossed his arms. "Do you have something you'd like to say at last?" He'd let her promise anything to him. To Maeve, and then would still light those fires. Maeve would not hear of her yielding for days. Aelin made herself meet his stare, her gauntlet-covered fingers pressing into the iron slab beneath her. One last chance. She'd seen the stars overhead. It was as great a gift as any she'd received, greater than the jewels and gowns and art she'd once coveted and amassed in Rifthold. The last gift she would receive if she played the hand she'd been dealt, if she played him right. To end this, end her, before Maeve could put the wordstone collar around her neck. Oh my God. Jesus. Dawn neared, the stars dimming one by one. Rowan lurked by the southernmost entrance to the camp, his power thrumming. Corrine's tent lay in the center of the camp. A mile and a half lay between Rowan and his prey. When the guards began their shift change, he'd rip the air from their lungs, would rip the air from the lungs of every soldier in his path. How many would he know? How many had he trained? A small part of him prayed the number would be few, that if they knew him, they'd be wise and stand down. He had no intention of stopping, though. Rowan freed the hatchet from his side, a long knife already glinting in the other. A killing calm had settled over him hours ago, days ago, months ago. Only a few more minutes. The 6 guards at the camp entrance stirred from their watches. The sentries in the trees behind him, unaware of his presence this night, would spot the action the moment their fellow sentries went down, and certainly spot him the moment he broke from the trees, crossing the narrow strip of grass between the forest and the camp. He debated flying in, but the aerial patrols had circled all night, and if he faced them, expending more power than he needed to while also fighting off the arrows and magic sure to be firing from below, he'd waste vital reserves of his energy. I'm nervous. So on foot, it would be a hard, brutal run to the center of the camp, then out, either with Aelin or Kareen. Still alive. He had to keep Kareen alive for now, long enough to clear this camp and reach a spot where they could slice every answer from him. Go, a quiet voice urged. Go now. SR's sister had advised to wait until dawn, when the shift was weakest, when she'd make sure certain guards didn't arrive on time. Go now. That voice, warm and yet insistent, tugged, pushed him toward the camp. Rowan bared his teeth, his breathing roughening. Lorcan and Gavriel would be waiting for the signal, a flare of his magic, when he got far enough into the camp. Now, Prince. He knew that voice, had felt its warmth, and if the Lady of the Light herself whispered at his ear, Rowan didn't give himself time to consider, to rage at the goddess who urged him to act but would gladly sacrifice his mate to the lock. So Rowan steeled himself, willing ice into his veins, calm, precise, deadly. Every swing of his blades, every blast of his power had to count. Rowan speared his magic toward the camp entrance. The guards grabbed for their throats, feeble shields wobbling around them. Rowan shattered them with half a thought, his magic tearing the air from their lungs, their blood. They went down a heartbeat later. Sentries shouted from the trees, orders of sound the alarm ringing out, but Rowan was already running, and the sentries in the trees, their shouts lingering on the wind as they gasped for breath, were already dead. Oh, God. Fuck. Okay. I'm so scared. The sky slowly bled toward dawn. Standing at the edge of the forest that bordered the eastern side of the camp, a good 2 miles of rolling, grassy hills between him and the edge of the army, Lorcan monitored the stirring troops. Gavriel had already shifted, and the mountain lion now paced near the tree line, waiting for the signal. It was an effort not to peer behind him, though Lorcan could not see her. They'd left a lead a few miles into the forest, hidden in a copse of trees bordering the glen. All should all go poorly. She'd flee deeper into the hilly woods, up into the ancient mountains, where far more deadly and cunning predators than Fae still prowled. She hadn't offered him a parting word, though she'd wished them all luck. Lorcan hadn't been able to find the right words anyway, so he'd left without so much as a look back. But he glanced back now, prayed that if they didn't return, she wouldn't come hunting for them. Gavriel halted his pacing, ears twitching toward the camp. Lorcan stiffened. A spark of his power awakened and flickered. Death beckoned nearby. It's too soon, Lorcan said, scanning for any sign of Whitethorn's signal. Nothing. Gavriel's ears lay flat against his head, and still those flutters of the dying prickled past. Chapter 26. Oh my God. This is too much. I'm gonna throw up. Aelin swallowed once, twice, the portrait of uncertain fear as she lay chained on the metal table, Kareen waiting for her answer. And then she said, her voice cracking, "When you finish breaking me apart for the day, how does it feel to know that you are still nothing?" Kareen grinned. "Some fire left in you, it seems. Good." She smiled back through the mask. "You were only given the oath for this. For me. Without me, you're nothing. You'll go back to being nothing. Less than nothing from what I've heard." Kareen's fingers tightened around the flint. "Keep talking." I don't know if I can say that word on live. I'm gonna get banned. "Let's see where it gets you." A rasping laugh broke from her. "The guards talk when you're gone. You know, they forget I'm Fae too. Can hear like you." Kareen said nothing. "At least they agree with me on one front. You're spineless. Have to tie up people to hurt them because it makes you feel like a male." Why is she eating his ass up right now? Aelin gave a pointed glance between his legs. Inadequate in the ways that count. A tremor went through him. "Would you like me to show you how inadequate I am?" Aelin huffed another laugh, haughty and cool, and gazed toward the ceiling, toward the lightning sky, the last she'd see if she played this right. There had always been another, a spare, to take her place should she fail. That her death would mean Dorian's, would send those hateful gods to demand his life to forge the lock. It was no strange thing to hate herself for it. She'd failed enough people, failed Terrason, that the additional weight barely landed. She wouldn't have much longer to feel it anyway. So she drawled toward the sky, the stars. Oh, I know there's not much worth seeing in that regard, Kareen. And you're not enough of a male to be able to use it without someone screaming, are you? She's tearing his ass up! She's tearing his ass up! At his silence, she smirked. I thought so. I dealt with plenty of your ilk at the Assassin's Guild. You're all the same. A deep snarl. Aelin only chuckled and adjusted her body, as if getting comfortable. Go ahead, Kareen. Do your worst. Fenris let out a warning whine. She waited, maintaining the smirk, the looseness in her limbs. A hand slammed into her gut, hard enough to... She bowed around it, the air vanishing from her. Then another blow, to her ribs, a cry rasping from her. Fenris barked. Locks clicked, unlocking. Hot breath tickled her ear as she was yanked off the table. Maeve's orders might hold me at bay, bitch, but let's see how much you talk after this. I don't want to read about Aelin getting R-worded. Please don't make me read that. Her chained legs failed to get under her before Kareen gripped the back of her head and slammed her face into the edge of the metal table. Stars burst, blinding and agonizing as metal on bone cracked through her. She stumbled, falling back, her chained feet sending her sprawling. Fenris barked again, frantic and raging, but Kareen was there, gripping her hair so tightly her eyes watered, and she cried out once more as he dragged her across the floor toward that great, burning brazier. He held her up by her hair and shoved her masked face forward. Let's see how you mock me now. Okay. Oh my god. What the fuck? The heat instantly singed her, the flames licking so close to her skin. Sorry. Ah, fuck! Sorry! The mask wormed on her face, the chains along her body with it. Despite herself, her plans, she shoved back, but Kareen held her firm, pushed her toward the fire as her body strained, fighting for any pocket of cool air. I'm going to melt your face so badly even the healers won't be able to fix you. He breathed in her ear, bearing down, her limbs starting to wobble, the heat scorching her skin, the chains and mask. He shoved her an inch closer to the flame. Aelin's foot slid back between his braced legs. Now. It had to be now. Enjoy the fire breathing, he hissed, and she let him shove her another inch lower, let him get off balance, just a fraction, as she slammed her body up. Not up, but back into him, her foot hooking around his ankle as he staggered. Aelin whirled, smashing her shoulder into his chest. Kareen crashed to the ground. She ran, or tried to, with the chains at her feet. On her legs, she could barely walk, but she stumbled past him, knowing he was already twisting, already rising up. Yo, I'm fucking shaking. I'm shaking. Run. Kareen's hands wrapped around her calves and yanked. She went down, teeth singing as they slammed against the mask, drawing blood from her lip. Then he was over her, raining blows on her head, her neck, her chest. She couldn't dislodge him, her muscles so drained from disuse, despite the healers keeping the atrophying at bay. Couldn't flip him, either, though she tried. Kareen fumbled behind them, for an iron poker, heating in the brazier. Aelin thrashed, trying to get her hands up and over his head, to loop those chains around his neck, but they'd been hooked to the irons at her feet sides. At her sides. Hooked to the irons at her sides. Sorry, down her back. I don't know where I got the word feet from. Fenris's snarling barks rang out. Kareen's hand fumbled again for the poker. Missed. Kareen glanced behind him to grab the poker, daring to take his eyes off her for a heartbeat. Aelin didn't hesitate. She rammed her head upward and slammed her masked face into Kareen's head. He knocked back, and she lunged toward the tent flaps. He had more restraint than she'd estimated. He wouldn't kill her, and what she'd done just now, provoking him. She'd barely made it out of her crouch when Kareen's hand gripped her hair again, when he hurled her with all his strength against the chest of drawers. Aelin hit it with a crack that echoed through her body. Something in her side snapped and she cried out. the sound small and broken as she collided with the floor. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh God. Fenris had seen his twin drive a knife through his heart. I'm so sorry. I do not want to be in Fenris's point of view right now. I do not want to be in Fenris's point of view right now. Y'all, if they touch my baby, I'm already tearing up just thinking about it. Oh God, I don't want to be in his point of view right now. Fenris had seen his twin drive a knife through his heart, had watched Connell bleed out onto the tiles and die, and had then been ordered to kneel before Maeve in that very blood as she'd bade him to attend her. He'd sat in a stone room for 2 months, witness to what they'd done to a young queen's body, her spirit, had been unable to help her as she'd screamed and screamed. He'd never stopped hearing those screams. But it was the sound that came out of her as Corrine hurled her into the chest of drawers where Fenris had watched him arranging his tools, the sound she made as she hit the floor that shattered him entirely. A small sound, quiet, hopeless. He'd never heard it from her, not once. Corrine got to his feet and wiped his bloodied, broken nose. Aelin Galathinius stirred, trying to rise onto her forearms. Corrine pulled the red-hot poker from the brazier. He pointed it at her like a sword. Fenris strained against his invisible bindings as Aelin glanced at him toward where he'd sat for the past 2 days, in that same damned spot by the tent wall. Despair shone in her eyes. True despair, without light or hope. The sort of despair that wished for death. The sort of despair that began to erode strength, to eat away at any resolve to endure. She blinked at him 4 times. I'm here. I'm with you. Fenris knew it for what it was. The final message. Not before death, but before the sort of breaking that no one could walk away from. Before Maeve returned with the word stone collar. Corrine rotated the poker in his hands, heat rippling off its point. I don't want to. Can we just wait like 5 minutes? Can we all just wait like 5 minutes? Rowan is literally on his way. Can we not wait like 5 minutes before we do something stupid? I don't even know what's gonna happen. But I'm already crying because I feel like it feels so final. Hold on, I can't see. Oh, shit. Okay, well, first tear shed. Oh, God, please don't kill him. Please don't kill him. I'm literally begging. Please don't kill him. And Fenris couldn't allow it. He wouldn't allow it. In his shredded soul, in what was left of him after all he'd been forced to see and do, he couldn't allow it. The blood oath kept his limbs planted, a dark chain that ran into his soul. He would not allow it. That final breaking. He pushed upward against the bond's dark chain, screaming through, though no sound came from his open maw. He pushed and pushed and pushed against those invisible chains, against that blood-sworn order to obey, to stay down, to watch. He defied it, all that the blood oath was. Pain lanced through him, into his very core. He blocked it out as Corrine pointed the smoldering poker at the young queen with a heart of wildfire. He would not allow it. Snarling. I'm gonna throw up. Okay. Just taking all the pain and I'm internalizing it. Okay, I'm good. Snarling, the male inside him, thrashing, Fenris bellowed at the dark chain binding him. He shredded into it, biting and tearing with every scrap of defiance he possessed. Let it kill him, wreck him. He would not serve, not another heartbeat. He would not obey. He would not obey. And slowly, Fenris got to his feet. Oh, please don't kill him. I'm literally begging. Please don't kill him. Please don't kill him. Please don't kill him. Please don't kill him. Pain shuddered aelin as she lay sprawled, panting, arms straining to hold her head and chest off the ground. It was not Corrine and the poker she stared at, but Fenris, rising upward, his body rippling with tremors of pain, snout wrinkled in rage. Even Corrine halted, looked toward the white wolf. Stand down. Fenris snarled, deep and vicious, and still he struggled to his feet. Corrine pointed the poker at the rug. Lie down. That is an order from your queen. Fenris spasmed, his hackles lifting, but he was standing. Standing. Despite the order, despite the blood oath's commands. Get up. From far away, the words sounded. Corrine roared. Lie down. Fenris's head thrashed from side to side, his body bucking against invisible chains, against an invisible oath. His dark eyes met Corrine's. Blood began running from the wolf's nostril. He'd kill him, to sever the oath. It would break his soul. His body would go soon after that. But Fenris put one paw forward. His claws dug into the ground. Corrine's face paled at the step. That impossible step. Fenris's eyes slid toward hers. Neither needed the silent code between them for the words she beheld in his gaze. The order and plea. Run. Corrine read the word too, and he hissed. Not with a shattered spine, she can't. Before he brought the poker, slamming down for aelin's back. With a roar, Fenris leapt, and with it, he snapped the blood oath completely. But he can survive it, right? He can survive it, right? This is one of those rare occasions where it's broken, but he's so strong that he can survive it, right? Right? Y'all? Y'all? Right? Right? Chapter 27. Wolf and Faye went tumbling to the carpet, roaring and tearing. Fenris lunged for Corrine's throat, his enormous body pinning the male, but Corrine got his feet between them and kicked. Aelin lurched upright, willing strength to her legs as she came into a kneel beside the chest of drawers. Fenris slammed into the side of the metal table, but was instantly moving, throwing his body against Corrine. A low hiss sounded nearby, and Aelin dared look away to find the poker lying to her right. She twisted her feet toward it, placed the center of the chains binding her ankles atop the red-hot tip. Slowly, the links in the center heated. Wolf and Faye clashed in a tangle of claws and fists and teeth, then leapt apart, severing the blood oath. It would kill him. These were his last breaths, his last heartbeats. I'll peel the fur from your bones, Corrine panted. Fenris breathed heavily, blood leaking from between his teeth as he placed one paw over the other, circling. His stare did not break from Corrine's as they moved, assessing each other for the killing blow. The links in the center of the chain began glowing. Overhead the sky lightening to gray. Fenris and Corrine circled again, step after step, wearing him out, wearing him down. Corrine knew the cost of severing the blood oath. Oh, I'm gonna throw up. Knew he had only to wait it out before Fenris was dead. Fenris knew it too. He charged, teeth snapping for Corrine's throat as his paw swiped for the male's shins. Aelin grabbed the poker, planted her heels, and drove the rod upward. It strained against the heated links in the chain, and she shoved and shoved her feet downward, her arms buckling. Corrine and Fenris rolled, and Aelin gritted her teeth, bellowing. The chain between her legs snapped. It was all she needed. She scrambled to her feet, but halted. Fenris, pinned by Corrine, met her gaze, snarled in warning and command. Run. Corrine whipped his head toward her, toward the chain hanging free between her ankles. You. But Fenris surged up, his jaws clamping around Corrine's shoulder. Corrine shouted. Archie, grabbing for Fenris's back. Fenris met her stare again, ripping into Corrine's shoulder even as the male shoved them into the edge of the table. Hammered Fenris's spine into the metal, hard enough that bone cracked. Run. And she didn't hesitate. She sprinted for the tent flaps and into the morning beyond. 1/2 mile to the center of the camp, to the tent. The soldiers had responded as Rowan anticipated, and he'd killed them accordingly. Birds of prey dove for him, attacking with wind and ice from above. He shattered their magic with a surge of his own, sending them scattering. A cluster of warriors charged from behind a row of tents. Some beheld him and ran back the way they'd come. All soldiers whom he trained, and some he hadn't, yet many stayed to fight. Rowan ripped through their shields, ripped the air from their lungs. Some found his hatchet swinging for their necks. Close. So close to that tent. He would signal Lorcan and Gavriel in a moment, when he was close enough to need the diversion for the way out. Another onslaught of soldiers barreled for him, and Rowan angled his long knife. His power blasted away their fired arrows, then blasted away the archers, turning them all to bloodied splinters. Chapter 28. Aelin ran. Her weakened legs stumbled on the grass, her still bound hands restricting the full range of motion, but she ran, picked a direction, any direction, but the river missed to her left and ran. The sun was rising in the army camp. There was motion behind her, shouting. She blocked it out and aimed right, toward the rising sun, as if it were Mala's own welcoming embrace. She couldn't get down enough air through the mask's thin slit, but she kept moving, racing past tents, past soldiers who whipped their heads toward her, as if puzzled. She clenched the poker in her iron-clad hands, refusing to see what the commotion was if Kareen raged behind her. But then she heard them, bellowed orders. Rushing steps in the grass behind, closing in. People ahead alerted by their cries. Bare feet flying over the ground. Her exhausted legs screamed to stop. Still Aelin aimed for the eastern horizon, toward the trees and mountains, toward the sun cresting over them. But... oh, there's a dog. Sorry. And when the first of the soldiers blocked her path, shouting to stop, she angled the iron poker and did not falter. Death sang to Lorcan. From the birds of prey that speared farther and farther into the camp, he knew Whitethorn was close to Kareen's tent. Soon now, they'd get the signal. Lorcan and Gavriel steadied their breathing, readying their power. It thrummed through them, twin waves cresting, but death began beckoning elsewhere in the camp, closer to them, moving fast. Lorcan scanned the brightening sky, the line of the first tents, the entrance with the guards. Someone's making a move this way, Lorcan murmured to Gavriel. But Whitethorn's still over there. Fenris. Or Connell, perhaps. Who's gonna tell him? Who's gonna tell him? Maybe Asar's sister, who he'd never liked, but he wouldn't give a shit about that if she hadn't betrayed them. He pointed north of the entrance, You take that side. Be ready to strike from the flank. Gavriel sped off, a predator ready to pounce unseen when Lorcan attacked head-on. Death glimmered. Whitethorn was nearly at the camp's center, and that force approaching their eastern entrance. To hell with waiting. Lorcan broke from the cover of trees, dark power swirling, primed to meet whatever broke through the line of tents. Freeing the sword at his side, he searched the sky, the camp. The world of death flickered as the rising sun gilded the rolling grasses and set the dew steaming. Nothing. No indication of who. He'd reached the first of the hollows that flowed to the camp edge. The dip narrow and steep when Aelin Galathinius appeared. Lorcan didn't expect the sob in his throat as she raced between the tents, as he beheld the iron mask and the chains on her, hands still bound, as he beheld the blood soaking her skin, the short white shift, her hair, longer than he'd last seen, and plastered to her head with gore. His knees stopped working, and even his magic faltered at the sight of her wild, desperate race for the camp's edge. Soldiers ran toward her. Lorcan surged into motion, flaring his magic up and wide, not to her, but to Whitethorn, still charging for the center of the camp. But wait, who's gonna help Fenris? She's here, he signaled. But Lorcan was too far. The grassy bumps and hollows between them now endless, as 10 soldiers converged on Aelin, blocking her path toward the open field. One swung his sword, a strike that would cleave her skull in two. The fool didn't realize who he faced, what he faced. That it wasn't a fire-breathing queen, bound in iron, who charged at them, but an assassin. With a twist, arms lifting, Aelin met that sword head-on, just as she'd planned. The mail sword fell short on his intended target, but hit precisely where she wished, in the center of the chains that bound her hands. Iron snapped. Then the mail sword was in her freed hands. Then his throat was spraying blood. Aelin whirled, slamming into the other soldiers who stood between her and freedom. Even as he ran for her, Lorcan could only gape at what unfolded. She struck before they knew where to run. Slash, duck, lunge. She got her other hand on one of their daggers. Then it was over, and there was nothing between her and the camp entrance but the 6 guards drawing their weapons. Lorcan lashed out with his magic, a lethal net of power that had those guards crashing to their knees. Necks snapped. Aelin didn't falter as they wilted to the ground. She charged past, aiming straight for the field and hills, to where Lorcan ran for her. He signaled again. To me. To me. Whether Aelin recognized it or him, she still raced his way. Whole. Her body looked whole, and yet she was so thin. Her blood-splattered legs straining to keep her upright. A rolling field of steep bumps and hollows lay between them. Lorcan swore. She wouldn't make it. Not over the terrain. Not drained like that. But she did. Aelin vanished into the first dip, and Lorcan's magic flared over and over, to her, to Whitethorn. And then she was up, cresting the hill, and he could see the slowness taking over, the sheer exhaustion from a body at its limit. Arrows twanged from bows, and a wall of them shot into the sky, aiming for her on those exposed hills. Lorcan sent a wave of his power, snapping them away. Still more fired, single shots this time, from so many directions he couldn't trace their sources. Trained archers, some of Maeve's best. Aelin had to... She already was. Aelin began zagging, depriving them of an easy target. Left to right, she darted over the hills, slower with each bump she cleared, each step toward Lorcan as he raced to her, 100 yards remaining between them. An arrow speared for her back, but Aelin lunged to the side, skidding in grass and dirt. She was up again in a heartbeat, weapon still in hand, charging for the hills and hollows between them. Another arrow aimed for her, and Lorcan made to snap it away. A wall of glittering gold got there first. From the north, leaping over the hollows, charged Gavriel. Aelin disappeared into a dip in the earth, and when she emerged, the lion ran at her side, a golden shield around her. Not close to her, but in the air around them. Unable to fully touch her with the iron mask, the chains draped around her torso, the iron gauntlets on her hands. Soldiers were spilling out of the camp, and Lorcan sent a black wind whipping for them. Where it touched them, they died, and those who did not found an impenetrable shield bearing the way to the field. He spread it as wide as he could. Blood oath or no, they were still his people, his soldiers. He'd prevent their deaths if he could, save them from themselves. Aelin was stumbling now, and Lorcan cleared the last of the hills between them. He opened his mouth to shout what he didn't know, but a cry pierced the blue sky. The sob that came out of Aelin as the hawk's bellow of fury cracked Lorcan's chest. But she kept running for the trees, for their cover. Lorcan and Gavriel fell into step beside her, and when she again stumbled, those 2 thin legs giving out, Lorcan gripped her under the arm and hauled her along. Fast as a shooting star, Rowan dove for them. He reached them as they passed the first of the trees. Who's gonna go get Fenris? Who's gonna go get Fenris? Who's gonna go get him? He can't stay there. He can't stay there. Rowan was instantly before her. Sorry. Hands going to the mask on her face, the chains, the blood coating her arms, her torn body. Aelin let out another sob, and then moaned, Fenris. It took Lorcan a moment to understand. It took her pointing behind them to the camp as she said again, as if speech was beyond her, Fenris. Her breath was a wet rasp, a plea, a broken, bloody plea. Fenris remained with Corrine, in the camp. Aelin pointed again, sobbing. Rowan turned from his mate. The rage in Rowan's eyes could devour the world, and that rage was about to extract the sort of vengeance only a mated male could command. Rowan's canines flashed, but his voice was deadly soft as he said to Lorcan, Take her to the glen. A jerk of his chin to Gavriel. You're with me. With a final look toward Aelin, his frozen rage, a brewing storm on the wind, the prince and the lion were gone, charging back toward the chaotic, bloody camp. Chapter 29. Oh, God. Oh, please don't. Please don't do this to me right now. Please don't. It's okay. It's okay. We don't have to do this. We don't have... Why are y'all sending me white hearts? Why are y'all sending me white hearts? He's not dying. He's not. He's not dying. He's not. Stop sending me white hearts. Stop! With the camp in outright chaos, it was far easier to slip in. Rowan's power blasted to the western edge, shattering tent and bone. Any soldiers lingering between the camp's eastern edge and the center ran toward it, clearing the way. Right to the tent he'd been so close to reaching when Lorcan's power had flared, a signal that they'd found her, or she had found them, it seemed, and when Rowan had seen her, first from the skies and then beside her, when he smelled the blood, both her own and others', when he beheld the chains and the iron mask clamped over her face, when she was sobbing at the sight of him, terror and despair coating her scent. The rage that roiled through him had no space for mercy, no room for compassion. There was neither in him as he and Gavriel snuck past the last cluster of tents to the large one situated in a cleared circle of grass, as if no one could stomach being near Kareen. Fenris was with her, or had been, from the quiet inside. He wondered if the wolf was dead. Gavriel shifted into his fey form and freed a knife at his hip. I'm having that feeling. I'm gonna throw up. An exchanged glance conveyed the order for silence as Rowan sent a wisp of wind floating into the tent. It sang back to him of two life forms, both injured. Blood thickened the air. It was all he needed. Silent as the breeze in the grass, they slipped between the tent flaps. Rowan didn't know where to look first. At the wolf and fey male sprawled on the floor, or at the iron coffin across the tent. The iron box they'd locked her in had to reinforce, it seemed, from the sloppy welding on the thick slabs atop it. The box was so small, so narrow. The smell of her blood, her fear, saturated the tent, emanated from that box. A metal table lay nearby, and beneath it, Rowan took in the three unlit braziers set beneath it, the chain anchors at the head and foot of the table, and at last looked toward the fey male left bloodied but still alive on the floor across from Fenris. Fenris, whom Gavriel was already crouched over, the golden light of his power wrapped around the blood-soaked fur, healing him. Okay, we're healing him. The white wolf did not rise to consciousness, but his breathing steadied. Good enough. Heal him, Rowan said with lethal softness. The lion looked up and found that Rowan's gaze was no longer on the wolf, but on Kareen. Chunks of flesh had been torn from Kareen's body. A lump on his temple told Rowan it had been the blow that had rendered him unconscious, as if Fenris had slammed Kareen's skull into the side of that metal table, and then collapsed himself mere feet away. Okay, but he's getting healed. He's fine. He's literally getting healed, y'all. Shh. Collapsed, perhaps not from the wounds themselves, but Rowan started. What had happened here, and what had been so terrible that the wolf had been able to do the impossible to spare Aelin from enduring it? Gavriel's tawny eyes flashed with wariness. Rowan pointed at Kareen again. Heal him. They didn't have much time, not to do what he wanted, what he needed. Some of the drawers in the tall chest had been knocked free, polished tools glinting within. A pouch of them had also been set on a piece of black velvet beside the metal table. Her blood sang to him of pain and despair, of utter terror, his fire heart. Gavriel's magic shimmered, golden light settling over Kareen. Rowan surveyed the tools Kareen had laid out, the ones in the drawer. Carefully, thoughtfully, he selected one, a thin, razor-sharp knife, a healer's tool, meant for sleek incisions and scraping out rot. Kareen groaned as unconsciousness gave way. By the time Kareen awoke, chained to that metal table, Rowan was ready. Kareen beheld who stood over him, the tool in Rowan's tattooed hand. The others he had also laid out on that piece of velvet and began thrashing. The iron chains held firm. Then Kareen beheld the frozen rage in Rowan's eyes, understood what he intended to do with that sharp, sharp knife. A dark stain spread across the front of Kareen's pants. Rowan wrapped an ice-kissed wind around the tent, blocking out all sound, and began. Love this. Love it. Okay. Now that I know that he's fine, I'll be fine. I'm gonna turn my brightness up real quick. It's gonna pause, but I'll be right back. Okay. Is he though? Yes, he's fine. No. My phone's not dying. Not yet. We're almost there, but not yet. Okay. Chapter 30. No, he's literally fine. He's literally fine. Don't say that he's not, because he literally is. Denial. Y'all always try to trick me, and then it never ends up happening, so he's literally fine. Chapter 30. The clash of conflict echoed across the land. What chapter are we reading until, Sarah? We started at 25. We're reading 7 chapters? 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. Okay, so 32 to 32? 31? Oh, okay. Okay. Gotcha. The clash of conflict echoed across the land, even from miles away. Deep in the rough hills of an ancient forest, Aelin had waited for hours. First shivering in the dark, then watching the sky bleed to gray, then at last blue, and with that final transition, the clamor had started. She'd alternated between pacing through the mossy glen, weaving amongst the gray boulders strewn between the trees, and sitting in the thrumming silence against one of the towering, wide-trunked trees, making herself as small and quiet as possible. Gabriel had sworn none of the strange or fell beasts in these lands would prowl so close to Doranel, but she didn't want to risk it, so she remained in the glen, where she'd been told to wait. Wait for them, or wait for things to go badly enough that she had to find her own way. Perhaps she'd seek out Asar, if it should come to that. It wouldn't come to that. She swore it, over and over. It couldn't come to that. The morning sun was beginning to warm the chilled shade when she saw them. Saw them, before she heard them, because their feet were silent on the forest floor, thanks to their immortal grace and training. The breath shuddered out of her as Lorcan emerged between 2 moss-crusted trees, eyes already fixed on her, and a step behind him, staggering along. Aelin didn't know what to do, with her body, with her hands, didn't know what to say, as aelin stumbled over root and rock, the mask and the chains clanking, blood soaking her. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh my god. I'm gonna start crying. She's out. Like, she's free. I'm sorry. It just finally hit me. I'm sorry, y'all. Oh my god. I feel like a lead right now. I feel like a lead right now. Okay, hold on. I can't see. Okay, we're good. Aelin didn't know what to do. With her body, her hands, didn't know what to say as aelin stumbled over root and rock, the mask and the chains clanking, blood soaking her. Not just blood from her own wounds, but those of others. She was thin, her golden hair so much longer, too long, even with the time apart. It fell nearly to her navel, most of it dark with caked blood, as if she'd run through a rain of it. No sign of Rowan or Gabriel, but no grief on Lorcan's face, nothing beyond urgency, given how he monitored the sky, the trees, searching for any pursuit. Aelin halted at the edge of the clearing. Her feet were bare, and the thin, short sift she wore revealed no major injuries. But there was little recognition in Aelin's eyes, shadowed with the mask. Lorcan said to the queen, "We'll wait here for them." Aelin, as if her body didn't quite belong to her, lifted her shackled, metal-encased hands. The chain linking them had been severed and hung in pieces off either manacle. Sorry, the same with those at her ankles. She tugged at one of the metal gauntlets. It didn't budge. She tugged again. The gauntlet didn't so much as shift. "Take it off." Her voice was low, gravelly. Aelin didn't know which one of them she ordered, but before she could cross the clearing, Lorcan gripped the queen's wrist to examine the locks. One corner of his mouth tightened. There was no easy way to free them, then. Aelin approached, her limp deep once more with Gabriel's magic. The gauntlets had been locked at her wrist, overlapping slightly with the shackle. Both had small keyholes. Both were made from iron. Aelin shifted slightly, bracing her weight on her uninjured leg to get a view of where the mask was bound to the back of Aelin's head. That lock was more complicated than the others, the chains thick and ancient. Lorcan had fitted the tip of a slender dagger into the lock of the gauntlet and was now angling it, trying to pick the mechanism. Take it off. The queen's guttural words were swallowed by the moss-crusted trees. I'm trying, Lurkin said, not gently, though certainly without his usual coldness. The dagger scraped in the lock, but to no avail. Take it off. The queen began trembling. Aelin snatched the dagger from him, metal clicking on metal as she fitted the blade's tip into the lock. The dagger shook in her iron-clad hand. Take it off, she breathed, lips curling back from her teeth. Take it off. Lurkin made to grab the dagger, but she angled away. He snapped. These locks are too clever. We need a proper locksmith. Panting through her clenched teeth, Aelin dug and twisted the dagger into the gauntlet's lock. A snap cracked through the clearing, but not the lock. Aelin withdrew the dagger to reveal the broken, chipped point. A shard of metal tumbled from the lock and into the moss. Aelin stared at the broken blade, at the shard in the greenery cushioning her bare, bloodied feet, her breaths coming faster and faster. Then she dropped the dagger into the moss, began clawing at the shackles on her arms, the gauntlets on her hands, the mask on her face. Take it off, she begged, as she scratched and tugged and yanked. Take it off! Elid reached a hand for her, to stop her before she ripped the skin clean off her bones, but Aelin dodged away, staggering deeper into the clearing. The queen dropped to her knees, bowing over them, and clawed at the mask. It didn't so much as move. Elid glanced to Lurkin. He was frozen, eyes wide as Aelin knelt in the moss, as her breathing became edged with sobs. He had done this, led them to this. Elid stepped toward Aelin, The queen's gauntlets drew blood where they scraped into her neck, her jaw, as she heaved against the mask. Take it off! The plea turned into a scream. Take it off! Over and over the queen screamed. Take it off! Take it off! Take it off! She was sobbing amid her screaming, the sound shattering through the ancient forest. She said no other words, pleaded to no gods, no ancestors, only those words, again and again and again. Take it off. Take it off. Take it off. Movement broke through the trees behind them, and the fact that Lurkin did not go for his weapons told Elid who it was. But any relief was short-lived as Rowan and Gavriel emerged, a massive white wolf hauled between them. The wolf, whose jaws was clamped around Elid's arm, tearing flesh to the bone. Fenris. He was unconscious, tongue lagging from his bloodied maw. Rowan had barely entered the clearing before he set down the wolf and stalked for Aelin. The prince was covered in blood. From his unhindered steps, Elid knew it wasn't his. Oof. From the blood coating his chin, his neck. She didn't want to know. Aelin, I don't get to read what he did to Kareen. Are you serious? I wanted to read what he did to Kareen. What the Not fair. Aelin ripped at the immovable mask, either unaware or uncaring of the prince before her, her consort, husband, and mate. Take it off. Aelin. Take it off. Take it off. Take it off. Her screams were unbearable, worse than those that day on the beach in Ilwi. Gavriel came to stand beside Elid, his golden skin pale as he took in the frantic queen. Slowly, Rowan knelt before her. Aelin. She only tipped her head up to the forest canopy and sobbed. Blood ran down her neck from the scratches she dug into her skin, mingling with what already coated her. Rowan reached out a trembling hand, the only sign of the agony Elid had little doubt was coursing through him. Gently, he laid his hands on her wrists. Gently, he closed his fingers around them, halting the brutal clawing and digging. Aelin sobbed, her body shuddering with the force of it. Take it off. Rowan's eyes flickered, panic and heartbreak and longing shining there. I will, but you have to be still, Fireheart, just for a few moments. Take it off. The sobs ebbed, tricking into something broken and raw. Rowan ran his thumbs over her wrists, over those iron shackles, as if it were nothing but her skin. Slowly, her shaking eased. No, not eased, Elid realized, as Rowan rose to his feet and stalked behind the queen, but contained, turned inward. Tremors rippled through Aelin's tense body, but she kept still as Rowan examined the lock. Yet something like shock and horror and sorrow flashed over his face as he surveyed her back. It was gone as soon as it appeared. A glance, and Gavriel and Lorcan drifted to his side, their steps slow and threatening. Across the small clearing, Fenris remained out, his white coat soaked with blood. Aelin only walked to aelin and took up the spot where Rowan had been. The queen's eyes were closed, as if it took all her concentration to remain still for another heartbeat, to allow them to look, to not claw at the irons. So Aelin said nothing, demanded nothing from her, save for a companion if she needed one. Behind Aelin, Rowan's blood-splattered face was grim while he studied the lock fastening the mask's chains to the back of her head. His nostrils flared slightly. Rage. Frustration. "I've never seen a lock like this," Gavriel murmured. Aelin began shaking again. Aelin put a hand on her knee. Aelin had scraped it raw, mud and grass stuck in her blood-crusted skin. She waited for the queen to shove her hand away, but Aelin didn't move, kept her eyes shut, her ragged breathing holding steady. Rowan gripped one of the chains binding the mask and nodded to Lorcan. The other one. Silently, Lorcan grasped the opposite end. They'd sever the iron if they had to. Aelin held her breath as both males strained, arms shaking. Nothing. They tried again. Aelin's breathing hitched. Aelin tightened her hand on the queen's knee. "She managed to snap the chains on her ankles and hands," Gavriel observed. "They're not indestructible. But with the chains on the mask so close to her head, a swipe of a sword was impossible. Or perhaps the mask had been made from far stronger iron." Rowan and Lorcan grunted as they heaved against the chains. It was of little use. Panting softly, then paused. Red welts shone above their hands. They tried to use... Sorry, my phone's dying. And I'm losing light, friends. Well, we might have to stop after this chapter. How much do we have left? Oh, shit. Fuck. They tried to use their magic to break the iron. Silence fell through the clearing. They couldn't linger here, not for much longer, but to take Aelin in the chains, when she was so frantic to be free of them. Aelin's eyes opened. They were empty, wholly drained, a warrior accepting defeat. Aelin blurted, scrambling for anything to banish that emptiness. "Was there ever a key? Did you see them using a key?" 2 blinks, as if that meant something. Rowan and Lorcan yanked again, straining. But Aelin's stare fell to the moss, the stones, narrowed slightly, as if the question had settled. Through the small hole in her mask, Aelin could barely see her mouth as the words, "A key. I don't have it. We don't have them," Aelin said, sensing the direction of Aelin's thoughts. "Manon and Dorian do." "Quiet," Lorcan hissed, not at the level of her voice, but the deadly information Aelin revealed. Aelin again blinked twice with that strange intentionality. Rowan snarled at the chains, heaving again, but Aelin stretched out a hand to the moss and traced a shape. "What is that?" Aelin leaned forward as the queen did it again, her hollow face unreadable. The Fae males paused at her question and watched Aelin's finger move through the green. "A word mark," Rowan said softly. "To open." Aelin traced it again, mute and stiff, as if none of them stood there. "They work on iron?" Gavriel asked, tracking Aelin's finger. "She unlocked iron doors in Ardalan's royal library with that symbol," Rowan murmured. "But she needed..." He let his words hang unfinished as he picked up the broken knife Aelin had discarded in the moss nearby and sliced it across his palm. Kneeling before her, he extended his bloodied hand. "Show me. Fireheart, show me again." He tapped her ankle, the shackle there. Silently, her movements stiff, Aelin leaned forward. She sniffed at the blood pooling in his hand, her nostrils flaring. Her eyes lifted to his, like the scent of his blood posed some question. "I'm your mate," Rowan whispered, as if it was the answer she sought, and the love in his eyes, and the way his voice broke, his bloodied hand trembling. Aelid's throat tightened. Aelin only looked at the blood pooling in his cupped palm, her fingers curled, the gauntlet clicking, as if it were another answer, too. "She can't do it with the iron," Aelin said. "If it's on her hands, it interferes with the magic in the blood." A blink from her, in that silent language. "It's why she put them on you, isn't it?" Aelin said, her chest straining. "To be sure you couldn't use your own blood with the word marks to free yourself." As if all the other iron wasn't already enough, Okay, don't hate me. I'm gonna pause real quick and we're gonna drive to finish this under a street light because I literally I'm struggling to see the words on the page, and for once it's not because of my tears. So we're gonna go under a lamplight. This one? Will this one give me light? Oh shit, this one might give me light, y'all. Hold on. Yay! Some light! Yay! Okay. Boop. And we're back. Okay, I can see. I can see y'all. Y'all can see me. Yay! Okay. Where did I leave off? Another blink, her face still so hollow and cold, tired. Rowan's jaw clenched, but he just dipped his finger into the blood in his palm and offered his hand to her. "Show me, Fireheart," he said again. Elid could have sworn he shuddered, and not from fear, as Aelin's metal-crusted hand closed around his. In halting, small movements, she guided his finger to trace the symbol onto the shackle around her ankle. A soft flare of greenish light, then the hiss and sigh of the lock filled the clearing. The shackle tumbled to the moss. Lorcan swore. Rowan offered his hand, his blood again. The shackle around her other ankle yielded to the word mark. Then the manacles around her wrists. Then the beautiful, horrible gauntlets thudded to the moss. Aelin lifted her bare hands to her face, reaching for the lock behind the mask, but halted. "I'll do it," Rowan said, his voice still soft, still full of that love. He moved behind her, and Elid stared at the horrible mask, the suns and flames carved and embossed along its ancient surface. A flare of light, a click of metal, and then it slid free. Her face was pale, so pale, all traces of the sun-kissed coloring gone, and empty, aware and yet not, wary. Elid kept still, letting the queen survey her. The males moved to face her, and Aelin looked up upon them in turn. Gavriel, who bowed his head, Lorcan, who stared right back at her, his dark gaze unreadable, and Rowan, whose breathing became jagged, his swallow audible. Aelin. The name, it seemed, was an unlocking too. Not of the queen she'd so briefly known, but the power inside her. Elid flinched as flame, golden and blazing, erupted around the queen. The shift burned away into ashes. Lorcan dragged Elid back, and she allowed it, even as the heat vanished, even as the flare of power contracted into an aura around the queen, a shimmering second skin. Aelin knelt there, burning, and did not speak. The flames flickered around her, though the moss, the roots, didn't burn, didn't so much as steam. And through the fire, Aelin's now long hair, half hiding her nakedness. Elid got a good look at what had been done to her. Aside from a bruise along her ribs, there was nothing. Not a mark, not a callus, not a single scar. The ones Elid had marked in those days before Aelin had been taken were gone, as if someone had wiped them away. That's what I was just thinking. Daenerys moment. Chapter 31. They had taken her scars. Maeve had taken them all away. It told Rowan enough about what had been done to her. When he'd seen her back, the smooth skin where the scars of Endivir and the scars from Kareen's whipping should have been, he'd suspected. They took her scars from Endivir? Are you serious? Are you for real? But kneeling, burning in nothing but her skin, there were no scars where there should have been. The almost necklace of them from Baba Yellowlegs, gone. The shackle marks from Endivir, gone. The scar where she'd been forced by Arabin Hamel to break her own arm, gone. And on her palms, it was upon her exposed palms that Aelin now gazed, as if realizing. Sorry. Oh my god, I'm sorry. Oh! I've been talking for too long, I'm sorry. As if realizing what was missing. The scars across her palms, one from the moment they had become Karanam, the other from her oath to Nehemiah, had disappeared entirely, like they had never been. Her flames burned brighter. Healers could remove scars, yes, but the most likely reason for the lack of them on aelin, on all the places where he'd once traced them with his hands, his mouth. It was new skin, all of it, save for her face, since he doubted they would be stupid enough to take off the mask. Nearly every inch of her was covered in new skin, unvarnished, as fresh as snow. The blood coating her hand burned away to reveal it. New skin, because they needed to replace what had been destroyed, to heal her so they could begin again and again. Gavriel and Elide had moved to where Fenris lay, the battlefield healing the former had done on the warrior, likely not enough to keep death at bay. You're fucking lying to me. You're fucking lying to me. No, ma'am! No! No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am! No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Gavriel said to no one in particular. He doesn't... Oh my god. Shut the fuck up. Shut up! Shut up! Because yes, he does. He has his whole life ahead of him. Oh, shut up. No. No. He doesn't have much longer. He'd broken the blood oath. Through sheer will, Fenris had broken it, and would soon pay the price when his life force bled out entirely. That's not true. It's not happening. Aelin's gaze shifted then, from her hands, her horrifically pristine skin, to the wolf across the clearing. She blinked twice, and then slowly rose. This is when she saves him. This is literally when she saves him. I'm so sorry. This is when she saves him. Unaware or uncaring of her nakedness, she took an unsteady step. Rowan was instantly there, or as close as the flames would allow. He could push through, shielding himself on ice or simply by cutting off the air that fed her flames. But to cross that line, to shove her into flames when so much, too much had been stolen from her. He didn't let himself think about the distant, wary recognition on her face when she'd seen him, seen all of them, as if she wasn't entirely certain to trust them. Trust this. Aelin managed another step, teetering. He glimpsed her neck as she passed. Even the twin bite marks, his mark of claiming, had vanished. Encased in flame, Aelin walked to Fenris. The white wolf did not stir. Sorrow softened her face, even with that quiet distance. Sorrow and gratitude. Gavriel and Elide remained on Fenris's other side as she approached, backed away a step. Not from fear, but to give her space in this moment of farewell. No. 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 Y'all, no. They had to go. Lingering here, despite the miles between them and the camp, was folly. They could carry Fenris until it was over, but Rowan couldn't bring himself to say it, to tell Aelin that it might not be wise to draw out this goodbye the way she needed. They had minutes, at best, to spare before they had to be on the move. But if scouts or sentries found them, he'd make sure they didn't get close enough to disturb her. Gavriel and Lorcan seemed to be having the same thought. I'm sorry. No. My phone is dying. Now my phone is dying. Of course it is. In this moment, it would choose to die. It's okay, because I need a breather, so it's fine. No, but it's not true. Okay. Hopefully my phone doesn't fall, because it tends to fall when I'm charging it. Your phone. That is so dirty. No. No! Don't say that. You're so dirty for that. Oh my god. Okay. Gabriel and Lorcan seemed to be having the same thought, their eyes meeting from across the clearing. Rowan jerked his chin toward the western tree line in silent order. They stalked for it. Aelin knelt beside Fenris, and her flame enveloped them both. The fire gave way to a reddish gold aura, a shield that he knew would melt the flesh of anyone who tried to cross. It flowed and rippled around them, a bubble of coppery air, and through it, Rowan watched as she ran a hand on the wolf's battered thigh. Please, no. Please, no. I hate being right. I really do. I really do. I hate being right. It's not fun. Not like this. Not fun. I don't want to be right. Y'all. Gabriel had healed most of the wounds, but the blood remained. Aelin made long, gentle strokes over his fur. Her head angled as she spoke too softly for Rowan to hear. Slowly, painfully, Fenris cracked open an eye. Agony filled it. Agony, and yet something like relief and joy at the side of her bare face. And exhaustion. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Such exhaustion that Rowan knew death would be a welcome embrace. A kiss from Silba herself, goddess of gentle ends. Aelin spoke again, the sound either contained or swallowed by her shield. No tears, only that sorrow and clarity. A queen's face, he realized as Lorcan and Gabriel took up spots along the glen's border. It was a queen's face that looked upon Fenris. A queen who took his massive paw in her hands, pushing back folds of fur and skin to unsheath a curved claw. She slid it over her bare forearm, splitting skin. Is she gonna do it? Wait. Can the blood oath save someone from dying? Yeah, it can, right? It can? It can, right? It can? Right? It can save someone from dying, right? I was thinking... Sorry. Okay, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Rowan's breath caught. Gabriel and Lorcan whirled toward them. Aelin spoke again, and Fenris blinked once in answer. She deemed that answer enough. Holy gods, Lorcan breathed as Aelin extended her bleeding forearm to Fenris's mouth. Holy rotting gods. For Fenris's loyalty, for his sacrifice, there was no greater reward she could offer. To keep him from death, there was no other way to save him. Only this, only the blood oath. And as Fenris managed to lap the blood from her wound, as he swore a silent vow to their queen, blinking a few more times, Rowan's chest became unbearably tight. Severing the blood oath to one queen had snapped his life force, his soul. Swearing the blood oath to another might very well repair that cleaving, the ancient magic binding Fenris's fading life to Aelin's. 3 mouthfuls. That's all Fenris took before he laid his head back on the moths and closed his eyes. Aelin curled on her side next to him, flames encompassing them both. Rowan couldn't move. None of them moved. Aelin mouthed a short, curt word. Fenris did not respond. She spoke again, and the queen's face unfaltering. Live. She'd used the blood oath to force him to remain on this side of life. Still, Fenris didn't stir. Across the bubble of flame and heat, Alid put a hand over her mouth, eyes shining bright. She'd read the word on Aelin's lips, too. Sorry. When I cry, my nose runs a lot, I'm sorry. Aelin spoke a third time, teeth flashing as she gave Fenris her first order. Live. Rowan didn't breathe as they waited. Long minutes passed. Then Fenris's eyes cracked open. Oh my god. Oh my god, I'm so scared. I was so scared. Yo, it's not funny. Yo, it's not funny. Oh. I told y'all he would be fine. I told y'all he would be fine. Told y'all. My boy was not dying. Aelin held the wolf's gaze. Nothing in her face save that grave, unyielding command. Slowly, Fenris stirred. His paws shifted beneath him, like straining, and he rose. I don't believe it, Lorcan whispered. I don't. But there was Fenris, standing before their now kneeling queen. And there was Fenris, inclining his head, shoulders dipping with him, one paw sweeping before the other, bowing. A ghost of a smile graced her mouth, gone before it ever took form. Aelin remained kneeling, though, even as Fenris surveyed them, surprise and relief lighting his dark eyes. His gaze met Rowan's, and Rowan smiled, bowing his head. Welcome to the court, pup, he said, his voice thick. Raw emotion rippled across that lupine face, and then Fenris turned back to Aelin. She was staring at nothing. Fenris nudged her shoulder with his furry head. She ran an idle hand through the wolf's white coat. Rowan's heart clenched. Maeve had cleaved into Rowan's own mind to trick his very instincts. What had she done to her? What had she done these months? We need to go, Gavriel said, his own voice thick as he took in Fenris, standing proud and watchful beside Aelin. We need to put distance between us and the camp and find somewhere to halt for the night, where they'd reassess how and where to leave this kingdom. Heading into the forest, toward the mountains, would be their best bet. The trees offered plenty of coverage and plenty of caves in which to hide. Can you walk? Lorcan asked Fenris. Fenris slid dark, baleful eyes at Lorcan. Well, that fight would come. That vengeance. The wolf gave him a curt nod. Elid reached for one of the packs stashed near the base of a tree. Which way? But Rowan didn't get to answer. Silent as wraiths, they appeared across the glen, as if they'd simply sparked into existence in the shade of the foliage. Little bodies, some pale, some black as night, some scaled, mostly concealed, save for the spindly fingers and wide, unblinking eyes. Elid gasped. The little folk. I love the little folk. Elid hadn't seen a whisper of the little folk since the days before Terrasen fell. Then it had been flashes and rustling within Oakwald's ancient shade. Never so many, never so openly, or as open as they would ever allow themselves to be. The half-dozen or so who had gathered across the clearing kept mostly hidden behind root and rock and cluster of leaves. None of the males moved, though Fenris's ears cocked toward them. A miracle. That's what had happened with the queen and the wolf. Though Fenris seemed drained, his eyes were clear as the little folk gathered. Aelin barely looked toward them. A pale, spindly hand rose over a moss-speckled boulder and curled. Come, Rowan asked, voice like granite. You wish us to follow you? Again the hand made the motion. Come, Gavriel murmured. They know this forest better than even we do. And you trust them? Lorcan demanded. Rowan's eyes settled on Aelin. They saved her life once. That night Erwin's assassin had returned for Aelin. They will do so again now. Silent and unseen, they passed through the trees and rocks and streams of the ancient forest. Rowan kept a step behind Aelin and Fenris, Gavriel and Elid at the head of the party, Lorcan at the rear, as they followed the little folk. Aelin had said nothing, done nothing except rise when they told her it was time to go. Rowan had offered her his cloak, and she had allowed it to pass through her bubble of golden, clear flame to wrap around her naked body. She clutched it at her chest as they walked, mile after mile, her feet bare. If the stones and roots of the forest hurt her, she didn't so much as flinch. She only walked on, Fenris at her side, within that sphere of fire, as if they were two ghosts of memory. a vision of old, striding through the trees, the queen and the wolf. The others spoke rarely, as the hours and miles passed. As the forested hills gave way to steeper inclines, the boulders larger, the rocks and trees broken in spots. From the ancient wars between the forest spirits, Gabriel whispered to Aelin when he noticed her frowning at a hillside full of felled trunks and splintered stone. Some were still waged by them, wholly unaware and unconcerned with the affairs of any realm but this. Rowan had never seen the face of ethereal beings far more ancient and secretive than even the little folk, but at his mountain home, set high in the range that they strode toward, he'd sometimes heard the shattering of rocks and trees on dark, moonless nights, when there was not a whisper of wind on the air, nor any storm to cause them. So close, only 20 or so miles to the mountain house he'd built. He'd planned to take Aelin there one day, though it was nothing but long-vanished ashes, just to show her where the house had been, where he'd buried Lyria. She was still up there, his mate who had never been, and his true mate. She strode unwavering through the trees, no more than a wraith. Still they followed the little folk, who beckoned from a tree, a rock and shrub ahead, and then vanished. Behind Lorcan, a few others hid their trail with clever hands and small magics. He prayed they had a place to stay for the night, a place where Aelin might sleep, might remain protected from Maeve's eyes when she realized she'd been tricked. They were headed eastward, far from the coast. Rowan didn't dare risk telling them that they needed to find a port. He'd see where they led them tonight and then craft their plan for returning to their own continent. But when the little folk appeared before our gargantuan boulder, when they then vanished and reappeared in a sliver cut into the rock itself, bony hands beckoning from within, Rowan found himself balking. The creature dwelling in the lake beneath Bald Mountain was a mild threat compared to the other things that hunted in dark and forgotten places. But the little folk beckoned again. Lorcan appeared at his side. Could be a trap. But Aelin and Gabriel walked toward it, unfazed, and behind them Aelin continued as well, so Rowan followed her, as he would follow her until his last breath, and beyond it. The cave mouth was tight, but soon opened into a larger passage. Aelin illuminated the space, bathing the black stone walls in a golden glow bright enough to see by, but her flame was dwarfed when they entered a massive chamber. The ceiling stretched into gloom, but it was not the height of the chamber that made him halt. Nooks and alcoves had been built into the side of the rock, some equipped with bedrolls, some with what seemed to be piles of clothes, and some with food. A small fire burned near one, and past it, tucked against the wall, a natural stone trough, so I don't know how to say that word, sorry, gleamed with water, courtesy of a small stream. But farther into the cave, on the other side of the chamber, flowing right up to the black rock itself, a great lake stretched into the darkness. There were countless subterranean lakes and rivers beneath these mountains, places so deep in the earth that even the Fae had not bothered or dared to explore. This one, it seemed, the little folk had claimed for themselves, going so far as to outfit the space with sprawling birch branches against the walls. They'd hung small garlands and wreaths from the white limbs, and amongst the leaves, little bluish lights twinkled. Magic. Old, strange magic, those lights. Like they'd been plucked from the night sky. Aelin was surveying the space, awe written over her features. Gabriel and Lorcan, however, assessed it with a sharper, warier eye. Rowan did the same. The only exit seemed to be the one they'd entered through, and the lake stretched too far to discern if a shore lay beyond it. Aelin did not pause as she strode for one of the glittering walls. There was none of her usual caution, no dart of her eyes as she weighed the exits and pitfalls, potential weapons to wield. A trance. It was almost as if she had slipped into a trance, plunged into some depthless ocean inside herself and drifted so far down that they might as well have been birds soaring over its distant surface. But she walked toward the wall, the birch branches artfully displayed across it. More of the little folk within, Rowan realized, perched on the branches, clinging to them. Aelin's steps were silent on the stone. Fenris halted nearby, as if to give her privacy. Rowan had the vague sense of Lorcan, Aelin, and Gabriel heading for the alcove across the cave to inspect the goods that had been laid out. but he lingered in the center of the passage as his mate paused before the living wall. There was no expression on her face, no tension in her body, yet she inclined her head to the little folk half hidden in the branches and boughs before her. Her jaw moved, speaking, brief, short words. He'd never so much as heard of the little folk talking, but there was his queen, his wife, his mate, murmuring with them. At last she turned away, her face still blank, her wildfire eyes as flat and cold as the lake. Fenris fell into step beside her, and Rowan remained in place as aelin aimed for the small fire. Safe. The little folk must have told her this cave was safe, if she now moved for the fire, her own sphere of it still burning bright. The others halted their assessment of the supplies, but aelin paid them no heed, paid the world no heed, as she took up a spot between the fire and the cave wall, lay upon the bare stone, and closed her eyes. Holy shit, y'all. What the fuck did I just read? God damn. Oh, God. I'm literally... Whew, good gravy. How are you doing? I'm doing great. I mean, nothing really happened. I was scared, not gonna lie. Thought we were losing Fenris, but we didn't lose Fenris, so I'm fine. I'm good. I was just really scared. But see, like, that's what I mean. Like, never mind. Let me not say that, because if I say that, boom, next chapter, fucking, like, Lorcan is dying or something. Yeah, and aelin escaped. But I knew she was gonna escape. Her scars are gone, dude. I feel like that's not affecting me as much as it should be. I'm just glad that she's okay. Like, I'm just glad that they made it out of there alive. I'm sorry, but her tattoos and her scars were not the top priority for me. Like, I get that it's very impactful and she's gonna, like, we have a long road to go in terms of recovery, but all the things that I wanted to happen in this chapter happened. Like, in these chapters happened. Yeah, no, I definitely don't think she's okay, but she is alive. And that's all I care about. She is alive. Granted, her sense of identity is gone. And she's very traumatized indeed. But she is alive. Damn. I want to know what they did to Kareen. I hope they made it very excruciatingly painful. And I hope they did not spare him anything. That's B's slogan. As long as they're alive. And now she has to go freaking sacrifice herself. Exactly. So, like, what was the point? Yeah. And, like, this, yeah. I feel like it'll affect me more once she's, like, talking about how much it's affecting her. Being alive and living is not the same. I know. But if we're talking about if I would have rather seen her die, the answer is no. I'm thankful that she and Fenris and Lorcan and Elide and Rowan and Gabriel are all living. I feel like that's why it's not affecting me as much, because, like, that was literally my biggest concern, was that they were gonna, like, die or some shit. So that's what I was really tunnel visioned on. I already know she's gonna die, but we're gonna have a little Feyre moment when she's literally brought back. So the gods are gonna take pity on her. She's gonna die, but she's going to come back. I know it. She's literally, the gods are literally gonna be like, dude, I'm so sorry that you had to go through this. Like, Ashayam brought Sam back. Why would you say that? The gods take pity. Mala wouldn't take pity on her? Y'all, I know Aelin is not dead. Aelin is not dead. Sounds like nice gods. Yeah. But for today, I feel like I'm affected, but I'm not affected. Was definitely very scared, and we have a lot of unpacking to do in terms of trauma and PTSD now, but yeah. The rest of the book, we shall see, because people gotta start dying. Like, this book can't be as sad as everyone makes it out to be and have 0 deaths. I'm gonna remind you about this later. That's what y'all always say. Y'all were over there sending me white hearts when Fenris was dying, and then he ended up coming back. So everything's gonna work out. Everything's gonna be fine. So yeah, everything's gonna be fine. It has to be, or I will not be. All right. Well, I cannot go live tomorrow, but I will try to go live again Wednesday, depending on how long the live is. So yeah, you don't trust us anymore. I don't. I'm so sorry. I don't trust y'all anymore. But yeah. All right. Love y'all. I'll see y'all hopefully on Wednesday. I'll go ahead and schedule it, and then if I have to cancel it because of work, then I will let y'all know. But yeah, love y'all. Bye. You need to react to your predicted deaths video when you finish Kingdom of Ash. I was already planning on it. I was already in my mind when I thought Fenris was dying. I was like, how am I'm gonna have to fucking stitch that video that I made and be like, I fucking hate being right, because I literally almost called his death. But yeah, anyway, I'll see y'all hopefully on Wednesday. I'll schedule it. Keep an eye out for it. Love y'all. Bye.